So we are not far away now from Ghost of Yōtei, and one of the biggest changes to this game is to do with the combat, with the devs adding multiple new weapons to this game that weren't available in Ghost of Tsushima, where really we only had the katana, our bow, and a handful of gadgets. And so today I'm going to run you guys through all of the confirmed weapons and gadgets that are available in Ghost of Yōtei. Now, first and foremost, we obviously have to start off with the katana because yes, they've added a bunch of new weapons to the game, but the katana is obviously returning to Ghost of Yōtei. That was always going to happen, and although it will be very similar to how it was in Ghost of Tsushima, the stance system in that game is sort of being replaced with all of these other weapons that I'll get to. And so in a weird way, I don't think that we can use the katana in the same way that we could in Ghost of Tsushima in terms of changing up our stance. That is no longer really a thing. And so even though the combat will be very, very similar at the end of the day, the katana combat in itself will have slightly less depth, just simply because we don't now have 4 different stances. We're just simply going to have the one stance for the katana. So in a weird way, using the katana might feel like there is less depth to the combat, even though the overall combat is a lot deeper than it was in Ghost of Tsushima. But it is good to see the katana is obviously making a return, and I dare say that this will probably be still one of the most used weapons for most people throughout their playtime. Now, moving on though, we do have a slightly different version of the katana, this being the dual katanas. Now, obviously the actual katanas themselves will be essentially the same, but instead of rocking one of these bad boys, we're going to be running 2, carrying 1 in each hand. Now, this is no doubt going to lead to some very, very fun combat. This actually reminds me quite a lot of Jedi Survivor, where they actually did a pretty similar thing, adding in a stance system in that game, but that stance system was actually pretty similar to how this game is going to be, where it was slightly different variations of the weapon. And much the same in Jedi Survivor, there was a sort of dual wield option, which for me in my own playtime was easily my favorite of all of those stances. And so I have no doubt that this is going to be one of the most enjoyable weapon options for us in Ghost of Yōtei. It will definitely be a lot more rapid than the regular katana, and it seems as though it will be a lot more sort of combo oriented. So this will most likely be that kind of all-out attack option where you're probably lacking the blocking capabilities that the other weapons have. But on the flip side, you're going to be dealing quite a lot of damage and doing it very, very quickly. So I'm very keen to get stuck in with the dual katanas, and I have no doubt this will be a bit of a fan favorite. Now, moving on, we then also have another great addition, this being the Kasaragama, which for those who don't know what a Kasaragama is, it's essentially a chain and a sickle rolled into the same weapon. So it's almost got multiple different uses. We've even seen in the gameplay for Ghost of Yōtei that there are a lot of different ways to use this. You can disarm enemies with it. You can essentially throw the sickle at enemies and then drag them back towards you because you're holding the chain still. And I don't think I've seen gameplay of this, but I have no doubt in my mind that we can probably whack enemies on the head with the ball that's on the end of the chain as well. Take that with a grain of salt. That's not confirmed, but that is a big part of a Kasaragama in real life. And having recently played Assassin's Creed Shadows earlier this year, where the Kasaragama was in that game as well, that was something you could do in that game too. So I think this is going to be a really fun weapon to use. Realistically, all of the weapons they're adding, they just look like so much fun, honestly. This one is probably the most unique. In fact, it's not probably, it is definitely the most unique of the lot, and I'm really keen to see how it plays out in game. Now, before we go any further, if you guys are interested in more Ghost of Yōtei content post-launch in the form of plenty of different guides, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. There is a hell of a lot of content on the way, so make sure you don't miss out. Now, the next addition they've made is the Odachi, which is essentially a greatsword. This is a longer version of a katana realistically, and once again this is going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Once again, going back to Jedi Survivor, the sort of heavy lightsaber that they used in that game turned out to be one of my favorite weapons, even though I generally don't go for that type of weapon. But now that I liked it in that game, I have no doubt I'm going to really love the Odachi in this game. It will obviously be a little bit slower than a regular katana, but it will also no doubt deal more damage. And I dare say that this is going to be really good against like shielded enemies, for example, where normally with a regular katana they might just be able to block your attacks, but you may be able to do really heavy attacks with the Odachi that will kind of just eventually break their shield. And so even though the stance system is gone, it kind of isn't gone at the end of the day, because there will still be be certain ways in which you can deal with different types of enemies. It is realistically just a bit of a different take on that original stance system. Now, last but definitely not least, when it comes to the main weapons, and I'm about to go through some of the gadgets and stuff as well, but as for the 5 main weapons, the final one is the Yari, which is realistically just a spear. And once again, this one looks like a lot of fun. Now, it's obviously going to add some nice range, both in the form of actual melee combat, just because you can hit enemies from further away. So that's going to be really good to counter a lot of different enemy types. There might be some that are really aggressive, and using the spear will help sort of fend them off. But then also another way that it will add range is that we can actually throw the Yari as well. And this looks absolutely deadly. It looks like it's essentially just going to be a one-hit kill, at least on most enemies anyway. So this one looks like a lot of fun. It looks very versatile. And if you guys played Ghost of Tsushima, you'll know that these spear enemies in that game were very annoying to deal with at times. So it's going to be fun to kind of turn that around and use the spear for ourselves rather than just getting deleted by it over and over again. Now that's it for the 5 main weapons, but there are also, like I said, some gadgets and also some actual ranged weapons as well. So they are definitely adding a hell of a lot to the game. Now, first and foremost, obviously the bow and arrow is returning. That was a bit of a staple when it came to Ghost of Tsushima. That was realistically our only other available weapon other than the katana, and it will obviously be returning in this game. It's really helpful for adding a bit of range to your playstyle. If there's a bunch of enemies and you don't want to go in there and sort of take them all out up close and personal, it can be really good to just use your bow to pick a few off before you head into battle. Something that I love about the bow and arrow as well in the first game, and no doubt in this game too, is that it is awesome for the sort of stealth side of the game. Realistically, you are at a bit of a disadvantage when you're playing stealthily, because you do have to get really close to enemies to actually do anything, which can be very hard to stay hidden. But with the bow and arrow, this obviously allows us to add some range while still being stealthy. So it is great to see the bow and arrow returning in Ghost of Yōtei. Now, to add to the ranged weapons though, there is also the addition of the Tanegashima, which is essentially a small like matchlock rifle, I believe they're called. And so this is another ranged weapon that we are going to be able to add to our arsenal. Now, the devs have confirmed these are more situational than anything. They're not something that you're going to be wanting to use all the time. So don't worry, it's not going to turn into a shooter. I think having a rifle in a game like this could make things a little bit too easy sometimes, but I have no doubt that the devs have kind of balanced that well so that we can't just run around shooting everyone, because that would just be a little bit too easy in my opinion. Now, last but not least, there are also the return of plenty of gadgets, just like there were in the first game. Now, some that are confirmed as of right now is that obviously smoke bombs will be making a return. That was a great way to not only stay stealthy in the first game, but even just kind of confuse enemies. So it's good to see those returning. There will also be kunai in this game, which are essentially like little throwing knives or throwing stars. So again, we're getting a little bit of added range, and that's going to help not only in regular combat, but once again, when it comes to stealth. We've also seen some gameplay. I'll try and showcase it for you guys if I can find it, of Atsu using blinding powder, which is essentially just going to confuse your enemy. They're not going to really know where you are anymore. And this might act a little bit like the smoke bombs, allowing you to get away, or it can just blind them, at which point you can just go and attack them. And then lastly, I thought it was worth mentioning, even though it's not really a gadget, but we will obviously have a knife as well. So we will be able to play stealthy just like we could in the first game as well. So at least as far as my research goes, that is all of the confirmed weapons and gadgets in Ghost of Yōtei. If I have missed any, please do leave a comment down below and let me know. And I'm keen to hear which of those 5 first weapons that I mentioned in terms of the hand-to-hand weapons that you guys are most excited to play. I think for me, probably the dual katanas and the Sarigama, but honestly, they're all looking like a hell of a lot of fun. So I'm honestly just so keen to get stuck into it. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.